Welcome to Lesson 6 of our Cultural Diversity Training. My name is Desiree Cochran-Norfolk. This lesson is about sexual orientation and heterosexism. So today we're exploring how sexual orientation, identity development, and heterosexism intersect with counseling. And this is a critical area because LGBTQ clients continue to face systemic discrimination, barriers to care, and also social stigma. And all of that is going to impact their mental health outcomes. So as counselors, it's our job not just to affirm sexual orientation, but also to recognize the societal structures that create distress. So we're going to talk about identity models, the impacts of heterosexism, and the role of advocacy in supporting clients. Remember, this is not just about memorizing terminology. It's about deepening our empathy and strengthening our ability to provide safe, affirming, and effective care for our clients. So let's start with a couple of key definitions here. Sexual orientation describes a person's emotional, romantic, and/or sexual attraction to others. It's going to include identities such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, queer, and some others. So it's important for us to realize that some people may not adopt a label, and that's going to be okay for us too. Heterosexism, this refers to the assumption that heterosexuality is the norm or superior to other orientations. And this assumption can show up in institutions, policy, and daily interactions. So as counselors, we need to recognize that heterosexism is not just simply an abstract concept. It's actively harming clients. And it creates environments where people feel unsafe to be themselves, and it increases risks for anxiety, depression, substance misuse, and even suicidality. So understanding identity development models is going to help us to appreciate the unique journeys of LGBTQ plus clients. So, for example, CASA's model of homosexual identity formation describes a couple of stages. So they start out in identity confusion. They're going to feel different without clear language for it. There's going to be some identity comparison, like wondering if they might be lesbian or gay, and some identity tolerance, like beginning to acknowledge the attraction, but not publicly. Then they move into identity acceptance, which is moving towards self-affirmation and selective disclosure. And then they move into identity pride. So this is embracing orientation and challenging heterosexism. Then they move into identity synthesis, which is integrating their sexual orientation into a whole sense of self. We have other models like Troyden's model, or I don't really know how to pronounce this name, Diagueli. And they expanded on this by emphasizing fluidity and lifelong development. So the point isn't to box the client into these stages. It's kind of just to normalize the process and to recognize where someone might be when they're entering into our counseling office. And it's important to remember that sexual orientation is not binary. Bisexual, pansexual, and fluid identities are going to highlight attraction to more than one gender. But these realities are often marginalized even within the LGBTQ plus spaces. And this is a phenomenon sometimes called bi erasure. Clients might feel pressured to pick a side, or they might experience mistrust from both the heterosexual and the gay and lesbian communities. So counselors, we have to validate these experiences and affirm bisexuality and fluidity as very legitimate orientations, and explore with them kind of how stigma, not the identity, but the stigma often causes distress. And heterosexism is going to show up in both subtle and overt ways. So in counseling, it might look like assuming all clients are straight, failing to ask about partners in inclusive ways. Maybe we are minimizing the client's experience of discrimination. And in society, heterosexism is going to include some discriminatory laws, but it's also going to include like workplace bias, or family rejection, or maybe even like hostile school environments. And so the result is going to be minority stress, that it's a chronic stress of like navigating a world that is devaluing your identity. And so we have to ask ourselves as clinicians, am I creating a space that's challenging the heterosexism or one that's unintentionally reinforcing it? And one of the ways that I have kind of navigated through this is some of the curriculum that we use for certain programs. And this is not for substance use, but for one of the domestic violence programs. It's intentionally stating for the men's program, your wife or your girlfriend in a lot of the curriculum. And so I changed that to I say your partner instead of your wife or your girlfriend, just to affirm and get rid of some of that systemic stuff in the curriculum. So let's ground ourselves in where things stand today. Demographically, the surveys show that the younger generations are more likely to openly identify as LGBTQ+. We've seen significant increases in people identifying as either bisexual, pansexual, queer, or fluid, and that's going to obviously reflect a broader acceptance of non-binary identities. But at the same time, the older LGBTQ plus adults often face really unique challenges because they lived through times when it was far less safe to disclose their identities. So family and relationship contexts are really a key consideration here. Some clients are coming from families who affirm them wholeheartedly. Others are going to face rejection or even estrangement from their families. So as counselors, we need to recognize that family acceptance is one of the strongest protective factors against depression and suicidality and substance use for LGBTQ plus youth. And when acceptance isn't persistent, we can help clients build chosen families and supportive networks. The school climate is another major factor. Title IX prohibits discrimination based on sex in federally funded schools. And increasingly, this has really been interpreted to include protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. But implementation is inconsistent. Some schools are safe, affirming spaces with GSAs, which that means gay, straight alliances. They have inclusive curricula and strong anti-bullying policies. Other schools, they remain hostile and that harassment goes unchecked. And so for LGBTQ plus youth, the difference between a supportive school climate and a hostile one can really be life-changing. So when we sit with clients, we have to ask, what's the climate of your family? What's the climate of your school, your community? And these environments profoundly shape mental health and resilience. And when we talk about heterosexism, it's not just a social issue, it's a public health issue as well. Rates of depression, anxiety, suicidality, and substance use typically higher among these populations of LGBTQ+. So the studies out there show that LGBTQ plus youth are more than 4 times as likely to commit suicide compared to their heterosexual peers. We have minority stress, which is that constant burden of the stigma and the discrimination and the concealment, and that's going to play a very huge role here. Substance use can become a coping mechanism for chronic stress or rejection or trauma. And that's one reason why LGBTQ plus clients can be underrepresented in treatment programs. But rather than just seeing substance use as the problem, we should understand it's one of the ways clients are managing an oppressive environment. So it's a symptom of the problem. There are also physical health disparities. So HIV/AIDS continues to disproportionately affect gay and bisexual men, particularly men of color. But it's not just HIV. Research is going to show higher rates of cardiovascular issues, chronic stress conditions, and certain cancers are linked to barriers in healthcare access and lower rates of preventative screenings. So for counselors, the takeaway is, we can't separate mental health from physical health. When we are exploring those presenting concerns, we need to ask about stress and coping skills and health behaviors and whether our clients feel safe accessing healthcare. And when stigma is the root of the distress, the solution isn't only individual therapy, it's advocacy, education, and also community change. So we've talked about heterosexism on the interpersonal level, but it's also institutional. Institutional heterosexism refers to the ways, policies, and procedures and environments that are systematically excluding or disadvantaging LGBTQ plus people. So, for example, maybe employee benefits don't cover same-sex partners. Intake forms may only offer like male and female checkboxes. School sex education programs may assume everybody's heterosexual. These are not small oversights. They're sending a message about who belongs and who does not. So as counselors, we need to control every system our clients in, but we can influence the environments that we're part of. And that means designing inclusive spaces intentionally. Do your intake forms allow clients to describe their relationships in their own words? Does your waiting room include affirming materials like books or brochures featuring LGBTQ plus families? Are there referral sources that you rely on that are LGBTQ plus friendly? Inclusivity doesn't happen by accident. It has to be designed. And when clients see intentional inclusivity, it's going to reduce anxiety. It's going to help build the trust, and it's going to signal them that they're safe to be their authentic selves with you. So when we talk about advocacy, remember, it's not always about marching on the steps of Congress, right? Sometimes it's about redesigning your forms or your website or your physical space to communicate. You are welcome here. So despite the challenges, LGBTQ plus communities are incredibly resilient. Research shows strong social networks, chosen families, affirming communities, and also creative expression are all going to serve as protective factors here. A lot of clients are going to draw resilience from activism and spirituality, or just the simple act of living authentically in a heterosexist world. So as counselors, we need to highlight and strengthen these resilience factors. We need to ask our clients about sources of joy, belonging, empowerment, and celebrate identity pride. Encourage them to lean into supportive networks. The goal is not only to reduce distress, but also help our clients to thrive. And one of the deepest wounds of heterosexism is internalized oppression. When clients absorb negative societal messages and turn them inward, right? So this can show up as like shame or self-hatred, maybe even a reluctance to pursue relationships openly. And it may even present as depression or anxiety that the clients aren't initially connecting to their orientation. So our role is to really just gently help our clients externalize the source of their distress and to see that the problem is not them, but the oppressive systems around them. Empowerment means shifting that narrative from what's wrong with me to what's wrong with the way society is treating me. So what does affirming counseling look like? It looks like inclusive language. Ask about their partners instead of assuming gender. So don't say, what's your wife's name or what's your husband's name? Just say, what's your partner? And then avoid the gendered assumptions that they have a husband or a wife. Just ask about their partner. Validation. We want to normalize a wide range of sexual orientations and remind clients that distress often comes from stigma, not from identity. We also want to do a safety assessment. We want to explore whether the clients are safe being at a home or a school or work. Safety planning is going to be essential here. Then we want to do intersectionality, recognizing that sexual orientation is going to interact with race and gender, identity, religion, the socioeconomic status. So like a Black lesbian client, for example, is going to face different challenges than a white gay man. We also need to look into community resources and connect our clients to LGBTQ plus groups or affirming faith spaces or advocacy organizations in their areas. And as counselors, we can't stop at the individual level. Advocacy is a professional responsibility. So that's going to look like speaking out when schools fail to protect their LGBTQ plus students, supporting workplace policies that extend benefits to same-sex partners, joining professional organizations that push for inclusive practices, and using your role as a counselor to educate communities about LGBTQ plus mental health. Advocacy doesn't just mean being political for the sake of politics. It means really just ensuring that your clients are having equitable access to help and safety and opportunity. So as we're closing this lesson, just remember that working competently with LGBTQ plus clients requires ongoing self-awareness. So you want to ask yourself, what message or messages did I internalize growing up about sexual orientation? And how do those beliefs shape my counseling? Where do I still need to learn and grow? Counselors' self-reflection and supervision and consultation are essential. And when we bring humility and openness into the room, we signal to clients that they can bring their full authentic selves too.